Hi, this is Lieutenant Colonel Kirkland back at you here, and I'm here with Captain Trish Dock. How you doing, Trish?
I'm great, sir. Excited to be here. How are you?
All right, great. I see you have changed the. I know the people who aren't on video on YouTube that has this podcast. You'll see your background now has some additional things, including some of your, what do we call that? We call that the "I Love Me" wall, or
That's
the
right.
things like that. So
I'm
I'd love.
representing the Air Force and the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so that's your husband was in the Marine Corps and
He
you're in the
was.
Air Force, and I'm looking forward to seeing an Army thing up there very soon. So,
I'll represent soon enough.
okay. Well, great. Well, today we're going to talk about the whole person concept and the importance of that idea. And so, when I think of whole person concept, there's an acronym that the Army ROTC uses, based on my background, Army RTC, which is a SAL, Scholar, Athlete, and Leader. And the ROTCs, or service academies, are looking for a person who embodies those three areas well. And so I think today we're going to probably talk more about leadership, but maybe maybe quickly, Trish, you can talk about what scholar and athlete and what we're looking at with those two in this kind of whole person concept.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Is it's kind of obvious what when you say scholar and athlete, right? You're getting good grades in school. You have a high GPA. Your SAT, ACT scores are sufficient for the academies, competitive.
Mhm.
And from the athletic standpoint perspective, you're participating in sports, hopefully varsity sports. You're striving for a team captain position. And those are very quantifiable aspects of the scholar athlete leader model. And it's really what most high school students tend to focus on is their scholar, going to classes, doing your homework, and your athletics. A lot of students play sports. But what's really underemphasized, but I think is one of the most important aspects, is leadership.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think that, when you look at, scholar, all the things that you mentioned, including, of course, making sure you have a curriculum that's strong and doing, the things that you want to do when you go to college. And then the athlete, obviously you hit that right on the head. But yeah, I mean, the leadership portion, I think, really it's not just leadership, but it's also, and, you and I have talked about this a lot, is, what your motivations are for going into the military and trying to divine those things. So it's not just, the fact that you're president of your class or you're the captain of the basketball team or whatever you are, but what is your motivation for wanting to go into the military, and what is your motivation for going to a service academy or ROTC program? So let me throw out a scenario to you of a person that I knew who will go unnamed, who went through 3 years of college and was not and didn't do ROTC in the 3 years of college that he went through. So after these 3 years of college, he then goes and decides to apply for West Point. And then so I asked the father of this candidate, I said, well, why didn't you go through ROTC for, because all you have is a couple years to go, and you can do Army ROTC and get this done in 2 years and get out into the force and be a second lieutenant in the United States Army. His response to me was, no, 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 no. We want him to go to West Point, or he wants to go to West Point. And so when you're facing a situation where you're, say, a sophomore or junior in college, you've got to go back and be a freshman again in college and take 4 more years of college.
That takes a lot of humility.
Yeah, it does. But the overall question there is, why are you doing this? In other words, what is the reason why you're going? What's the reason why we go to a service academy or to an ROTC program? Is because you want to have the prestige and of going to West Point and saying for the rest of your life that you went to the U.S. Military Academy, West Point, put in Air Force or Navy or whatever else other, or is the reason that you want to lead soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines as a second lieutenant in the United States Army, executing the missions that the United States government needs you to do, and to fulfill the ultimate mission of whatever the commissioning source is. So he didn't really have a good answer for me on that one. And it kind of continues to bother me a little bit, even though this person eventually went through 4 years and then graduated and now is in the force. But there's, 2 or 3 years where that person could have been in the force doing things for the military. But because of what I consider to be kind of what I think a number of people see as the academies of graduating as a into itself, rather than what the purpose of the military academy is, which is serving as a second lieutenant. So the question there is, what is the motivation? What is the overall motivation of that person? Is it just to have graduated from the academy, or is it to serve? What's the thing that's driving that person to wanting to do all of this? And so I don't know. I mean, I think it just brings up some questions. And another example would be someone who is being interviewed for, say, a service academy, and then a person on the interview committee says, "Well, what happens if you're not selected for an academy?" And then suddenly there's a blank stare on this person's face, and they don't really have an answer for that person. So then the question, if I'm on that committee, comes up is, what is the purpose of what you're doing here? Is it because because you want to graduate from a prestigious academy? Or is it because you want to serve as a lieutenant or an ensign or whatever, lieutenant or an ensign in our military? What is your ultimate goal? What is the ultimate reason you are doing this in the end? And if your answer is, well, I'm not, if it's an academy or nothing, you have to question the motivation of that person. And if that person's doing it for the right reasons, in the end, and if they understand the larger picture. So am I being too tough here? And please, Trish, tell me if I'm being too tough. I may be, but it's just my kind of initial rant or thinking about on this issue.
No, I don't think you're being too tough at all. My perspective, the only other perspective that I could offer is sometimes there's folks who don't come from military families who find out about the service academies, and maybe they don't even know about ROTC. They don't know what ROTC is. They think it's just junior ROTC is in high school and then that's it. And because they're so new to this community, they haven't done the research yet to figure out, okay, are there different options? So to them, they want to join the military, they want a commission, and they're not even really aware of ROTC and all of the opportunities there. And that's just a matter of not educating yourself. However, if you go into an interview and you don't know about ROTC, have you really done the due diligence? Have you really shown to the committee that you are prepared and know what you're taking on? Because if you don't even know about ROTC and you want to go to a service academy and you're in a congressional interview or you're in your liaison officer interview, I would question, okay, is this someone that's really committed and ready to be an officer if they can't even figure out the different ways to become an officer?
What do you think of a person who doesn't get into an academy and then is offered an ROTC scholarship and turns it down? In other words, West Point Academy or nothing.
Yeah,
and we have candidates that we work with who are like that.
We do. And that's a really tough question because from my perspective, if they're turned down from an academy and they turn down an ROTC scholarship, I'm almost happy that they did that because I don't want that person. I want a person who's going to put the needs of the service and the Constitution, supporting and defending the Constitution, above their own personal gain. Now we all have personal gain, and we're all going to prioritize ourselves to some extent. But if you aren't willing to commission because you believe that a second lieutenant out of West Point is better than a second lieutenant out of Army ROTC, then I want go enjoy your civilian life and do something else.
Right. Yeah. And, I think you're right on there. I think it's also myopic, in a lot of ways. I think, that it's It's really not understanding the larger picture of what's really going on, and the fact that ROTC produces the vast majority of our officers, and they're serving in senior positions and are probably the most important commissioning source that we have in the military. And so, yeah, it's an education piece, but it's also a just having your priorities and understanding what your priorities are. So so I guess I guess we just have to kind of look at that and kind of see and kind of educate people in that regard, in order to make sure that they can do that. But I mean, it gets to kind of the larger ideas of why you're doing this. So rant over why we do why. So the question is, why are we doing what we're doing, and why are you going into the armed services? I think.
Yeah, and doing the research to figure out what it's going to be like
Mm-hmm.
is key there, to figure out what career fields you're interested in, and all the things that we talk about with the students that we work with. But getting back to the leadership piece, of the 10,000 candidates that apply to each service academy every year, what percentage of them, sir, do you think actively take on leadership roles, and would kind of meet the criteria for leader in the scholar athlete leader model, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I'd say, the vast majority are probably doing some sort of leadership, in some way, shape, or form, whether that's, in their high school, doing something in their high school, being a captain of a team, leading in, being some sort of leader in their church, and maybe a private organization, maybe in uh, a military, high school military organization like a Civil Air Patrol or something like that. Uh, I think I think the majority of people are doing that. It's really what I see as the quality of those leadership roles, and in particular, and we've talked about this before, is the emphasis on the peer leadership piece of this, which is important. And if you look at the service academies, and I'll make this argument a lot, is that you'll notice, if you look at the percentages that are class presidents, it's extremely, I mean, it's almost crazy high how much. I think it's like, what, 15% or something,
Hmm.
about, maybe if it's higher than that. And that indicates to me that the service academy values the class president as a particular role, because what it shows is that your peers are the ones that are that value you as a leader. Because let's face it, you can do a lot of leadership outside of school, or outside of, and become a quote unquote leader through a lot of different things. And your parents could have been the one that set you up in these organizations, but it's not. It's a very, very rare, you're not going to see a situation where someone's elected class president because mommy wanted, you to be the class president. You know what I mean? And
So
so,
true.
it's kind of, you know, I, the BS filter that the academies have, and I think ROTCs maybe to a less degree, about what's a true leadership position and what's not, is, it's pretty easy to see. And when you take a look at all of these candidates, records, and you take a look at all of them, and you take a look at the ones that we've had, you can see which ones, seem to be the ones that are the truly standout leaders versus somebody who's not quite as much of a standout leader. But that doesn't mean you can't improve, you know?
Sure. And there's no time like the present to improve. Jump into anything now. But I mean, one of the big things that I see is differentiating between if a leadership position was elected by your peers or selected by an adult. Team captains is a great example. Is that something where your team came together and elected you as team captain, or did the coach choose? And you can communicate that, and you can show that, my peers chose me to be the football team captain versus my coach. And those small little nuances do matter. And it's also a good thing for, if you're an underclassman now in high school, to start thinking about, okay, my relationships with my peers matter. If I'm going to be a leader, thinking about what leadership looks like, and not just, bossing everybody around as a leader, but actually having charisma and not just relying on positional authority.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome example of that. It's and there is, like, in the application, there's spaces to do that on the application. In your ROTC or Service Academy application, they list. There's usually an additional comment box, and it's important to kind of put down those things. That elected by peers. Or like you were saying. I mean that may not seem to be evident, but it is something I think that's very, very important. That's why, like, the Service Academy will tend to give more points and give more consideration to somebody who's the captain of a very popular team. For example, the football team, or the women's basketball team, women's soccer team, or whatever it is, the popular sports in school. Because first of all, the tendency is it attracts probably higher quality athletes in some respect. Now, not don't want to disparage other sports, but it gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of school attention or whatever. So then the selection of the captain in that sport is known throughout the school in a lot of ways. So if you're the captain of the football team, people are going to know that you're the captain of the football team. Versus, I think you'd be hard pressed to ask in a typical high school who the president of the tennis team is. I mean, who the captain of the tennis team
You're
is.
hating on tennis.
Tennis, or I don't know. Let's think of another one. I don't know. Cross country. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
just Those are
golf.
two examples. You wouldn't really, in my high school, you wouldn't know who the captain of the cross country team was.
Yeah, and I
You
think
wouldn't know that.
if you pull that out too, it's like thinking about, okay, why does the military want folks who have good relationships with their peers? When you're commissioning as a second lieutenant and you're 21, 22 years old, yes, you're going to have a lot of other 20, 19, 18-year olds working for you. You're also going to have people in their 30s working for you. So it's important to have that ability to be able to communicate effectively with people and lead people.
Right. And then in the ROTCs or in the service academies, it's really all about peer leadership. The 4 years you're there, you're going to be leading your peers. So that is even, that in the short term, that's even more important, is that, generally, if you were ostracized by your peers in high school, it's likely that you're going to continue that being ostracized to a degree in ROTC or in the service academy. So it's going to continue to follow you, because whatever traits you had, or whatever kind of characteristics you had, is going to continue there later. Versus a person who is head of the student senate and organize the senior prom. Like, I've dealt with a couple of candidates recently who've done that. To me, I mean, I don't know about you and your senior prom, but I wouldn't want to put it in the hands of somebody I didn't trust.
Very true.
I wanted to have a great senior prom, and if I knew if somebody who I didn't think was a good leader was running it, I'm going like, no way, because this is my senior prom. This is an important part of kind of who I am. So I'd say that that's kind of where the academies and ROTCs kind of look at things, and in more depth and nuance in those ways. So, but that's not saying I don't think that you can, somebody who is not in those positions can't continue to iteratively improve themselves over the time. And so I think you hit on it earlier, is getting involved in things, finding leadership opportunities, just improving your leadership over time by volunteering in with leadership. And what you find is, if you volunteer, organize people, you get better at what you're doing, so that by the time, say, you are a senior and you're getting ready to go, you've improved your ability to work with others. You've improved yourself, and you learn how to work with others, rather than avoiding it, you meet it head on and work and develop those kind of things. So sometimes what I recommend candidates to do is, do you see some trash on your road outside your in your community? Why don't organize a cleanup of that? Get a couple of your friends together and some of their friends, and organize it, and give and clean up your community. Maybe there's a food drive you want to do. Maybe you can get some of your friends to help you with that, and have them get your other friends to do that. And then from that, you learn and get the respect of your peers. And then that builds on other things or
Yeah,
something
I
like
think
that. You know what I'm saying?
absolutely. One of the dead giveaways is when you're in an interview and someone asks you, "Okay, can you tell me about when you were the, leader of this charity organization? Can you tell me, an example of a time that you had a success, an example of a time that you had a failure, and what you learned from that?" And if you didn't actually do a whole lot as a leader there, it's going to be hard for you to come up with solid answers for that. So actually, investing the time into your leadership responsibilities and potentially, you might become a leader in an organization and there's really not a lot going on. And so students use that as an excuse. Well, it wasn't, we weren't having meetings or this happened. And that's not acceptable because as a leader, it's up to you to make things happen. So you need to take the initiative to put those meetings together and find some underlying ways to unify the team if that's what's going on.
Right. And you talk about failures too. I mean, if you're really invested in an organization, you're going to have failures along the way too. So that the almost all of the interviews get at this kind of example of a failure, or or a time that you've had difficulty, So if you really care about anything or care about an organization you're going to involve in, you're going to hit rough spots. Like I had a candidate this year who was having difficulty getting his organization recognized by the school, and so he had to fight a battle for a year to get the money and the recognition to even start an organization in his high school. So that's someone who's fighting through an administrative issue, feeling strongly about something, and then eventually pushing through. I mean, so that's a person who, is a leader, a person who cares about something, who, faces some sort of opposition or difficulty, works through it, and then we see a success on the other end of it, So, another indicator of somebody who, is a leader, as they say. So, so it's multidimensional. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your high school. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your community. It can be, the like Civil Air Patrol or Junior ROTC or something like that. But it can be a multitude of different organizations. And if there's a problem, it probably needs a solution, and you can insert yourself in there and make a difference.
And finding out what the problems are and your passion and your area of passion. If you're, whether it's, maybe you're going to go research this issue as an intern somewhere and hope, there's just so many different options. It doesn't have to be the traditional option. As long as you have responsibility, you have a job, you can work your way up the ladder at work, you could become the store manager. There's just so many room for different things that the academies want to see.
Yeah, and we talk about a job. I think that's oftentimes okay. So the military and a lot of parents, I think, and candidates don't really understand this, is that is that we are more practical in who we are as people. We're less interested in the fact that you went to Africa and fed the children in Africa versus actually, and there's nothing wrong with going to Africa and feeding the children on your parents flew you over there to do that. Or, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is that actually having a job where you're actually working with adults and having to execute a mission to be able to do something, like just simply being like a server at a restaurant and being able to have to do cooking something in a restaurant. I had a candidate a couple of years ago who was a assistant manager of the frozen food section of a Target store, and he was supervising people in their 30s. And he had generators that broke down, and he had to figure out how to get these generators repaired. We would have lost millions of dollars worth of food in the Target store, and he had to actually fire people who weren't doing what they were supposed to do in the section. He was 18 years old,
Yeah.
So what does
Impressive.
that tell you? Okay, so sometimes we downplay having a job, having a paying job. But to me, I mean, that shows me sometimes if you can really talk about things like that, more leadership than some sort of, esoteric organization that, you or someone else may have gotten you into, where you're doing something. So do not do not underestimate a paying job, in my
And
opinion.
especially for service academies, I found that it seems like it's very critical. And if you have a job, definitely talk about it if you're applying to a service academy during your congressional nomination interview, because congressmen and women love to hear about the responsibilities of a job, because it's exactly what you're saying, sir.
Yeah, and paid work is lots of points on a lot of these things. Sometimes they make an emphasis about paid work year round, and they're trying to get at maybe people who, are maybe of that need to support their family, so they want to give them additional bump. But I think even a part-time job over the summer or something can be huge, and the life lessons that you learn over a period of time in doing a job, I think the leadership there is just tremendous in a lot of
Absolutely.
ways. And so I think it's something that what I see with some parents is they keep their kids away from a paying job and and to do other things. And, I can understand if it impedes, during the academic year impedes your ability to be able to, to do your homework and things like that. But oftentimes what you'll see over the summer is it's jam packed full of these extracurriculars at the expense of maybe having a part-time paying job that will introduce them to other things that I think are such as what we just talked about, that I think is maybe in my mind more important life lessons than just simply adding another extracurricular in the summertime.
Definitely. There's just so many nuances with the scholar athlete leader model, but I think, like we've been talking about leadership, it's just a lot harder to define than scholar and athlete. So I'm really glad that we could kind of dive into that today.
Yeah, so I know also in the blog post that we just did, you talked a little bit about values. I
Yes,
noticed, and that
absolutely.
values, and we always, and that I've done some ranting on values, right, too. So Army values, Navy values, Air Force values. So what's that all about, and why did you bring that up in your blog post? Because you wrote that blog post that listeners can find on our sites, I
Definitely.
should say.
I mean, it comes back to, why are you joining the military in the first place? And personally, I don't believe that many students who don't have the right reasons for commissioning into the service will make it through 4 years at a really competitive, just nose to the grindstone all the time with the service academies, and just the strict the rules, and unless you are there for the right reasons, a lot of students can't hack it. And so that's why most classes start with 12, 1300 appointees, and then graduate with around 1,000, maybe 950, something along those lines. And a lot of it's because I don't think the students really understood what they were taking on to
Hmm.
begin with. So I think this is all solved with the core values. If every service academy appointee could just spend a month studying the core values before they went there and
Hmm.
really understanding what those core values are, I think we would have way less attrition at the service academies. And
Right.
I'll just harp on Air Force because they're obviously the best. But
Of course they are. Yeah.
integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. They're short, they're to the point, but I think they encompass most of the core values. And you have to do the right thing all the time. That's really, there's no other option. You always have to put the right thing or your integrity first. And then, service before self. This gets back to the leadership aspect. And it's like, why do you want to be a leader? Do you want to be a leader because you want to look good? Or are you actually interested in serving your soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians now with the Space Force.
Yeah,
And I
see,
think
I
they're very
love that one. I love the service before self. I love that with the Air Force because and then if you can show that your leadership in high school was reflective of that to a degree, I think that's even stronger in a lot of ways because you know particularly like if you're in a peer leadership position, like say if you're captain of the football team, rather than saying my peers love me and I'm captain of the football team and thank you, it's I use that position to change the character of the team. Before we would bully incoming freshman football players. But this year, me and the other two captains decided we were going to change the way that we did things and we received freshman football candidates in. Or, you can talk about like how you helped encourage other people to become better parts of themselves. How did you use your leadership position to not just aggrandize yourself, but to serve others in those positions? And so when you're thinking about when you're in that leadership position, definitely I think the ROTCs and service academies are interested in that kind of thought. Like, how did you use your leadership position? And if you can show that you were thinking of others before yourself, I think that's huge as far as being able to to show them that you're embodying these values.
How did you improve your group, your team, your school, your community, anything, whatever
Exactly.
you're involved with?
Exactly. No matter what that is. So service above self is awesome. I mean, not integrity first is great too, but service above self really gets to that. And the final one is,
Excellence in all we do.
what does that mean to you?
I mean, always pushing yourself, always challenging yourself to improve and to be the
Mhm,
best version of yourself.
mhm.
Never taking the easy way out, just always choosing the more difficult path. So, with the understanding and the knowledge that you are trying to become the best leader possible. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you pursue excellence every day without fail. So, leading by example all the time for your people. When you're a cadet or midshipman, when you're a second lieutenant, it doesn't matter. You always set the example and you aim for, you aim for perfection. You're not going to hit perfection, but you do the best that you can, and it's going, as long as you keep making those strides, that's the important thing.
Yep, exactly. And the Army couldn't just do three, so I think we did like seven.
Seven.
But one of the ones that I really like with the Army is respect. What I mean is that is like one of my favorite, and it does address sort of the Air Force values in a lot of ways. But respect to me is respecting others. No matter who they are. Well, it's basically respecting the integrity of each individual person as a human being, whether or not they're whatever sexual persuasion they are, whatever sex they are, whatever nationality or race that they are, that you respect that person for who they are, and understanding that, because to me respect is a bedrock of almost everything that you do as a leader. And sometimes they do that. When we prepare people for for the congressional nomination, sometimes some of the civilian questioners will come out and say, what do you think of the homosexual policy in the military,
Mhm.
or what do you think of women in the military, or whatever? And the answer, or what do you think of transsexuals in the military? Just name, or what do you think of Martians in the military, or whatever that is? Not Martians. That's obviously not the real one. But what I'm saying is that who do you think of anything in any? To me, what it boils down to is respect. Do you respect other people? Do you respect other human beings for who they are as people? And are you going to show them the I don't want to say respect again, I'm thinking of another word, but you show them the thing, what they deserve as a human being. I
Yeah,
mean,
the empathy, the compassion,
right, right,
and just
exactly.
treating others like, following the golden rule, treating others like you want to be treated, and just making sure that all the time, it's not, it's, if no one's watching, how do you act? To me, that's
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to, I think, integrity and things like that.
mhm.
And so if they can do the job, if they can do the job that they're given, whatever that is, mentally and physically, that should be the only criteria that one uses in those cases, and that just goes back to respect. And then it also includes our international partners or even our enemy. Do you have that bedrock of respect? If you don't respect your enemy as human beings, you're going to commit atrocities
Hmm.
against them because you don't see them as your fellow human beings. You see them as some sort of, subhuman, which is what we've seen so many times in our history, whether
Hmm.
it's the Nazis looking at the Jews or the way that, that the way that other people were demeaned, their opposition in the past. So it's all about kind of the respect. And that's why I think and anytime you see kind of any sort of issues that we have in the military, like, for example, sexual assault, sexual harassment, uh, failings and everything, it really boils down to a respect issue, in my opinion. So that's, I think, another key thing that can be brought out, and it's going to be brought out in your questions when they ask you about the diversity question, or they ask you about, particularly the diversity question. But
Hmm.
they're getting at kind of, when have you experienced people other than yourself and shown that respect that's due to them.
Yeah, all excellent questions and all things that not a lot of students really focus on until they start writing their essays because they're asked straight up in the essays. So if you're listening to this right now, now's the opportunity to go out there and start, you know, pursuing, maybe getting out of your comfort zone a little bit, volunteering for that job, that leadership position, just building those relationships to eventually take a leadership position because you got to start somewhere. You're not just going to be a leader in a group. First, you have to join the group. So get started now and go out and fail. Be willing to fail gracefully, and then pick yourself up and keep going.
Exactly. And oh, by the way, continue to build up your body and through athletics and through, getting ready for all the physical fitness tests, and keep your straight A's or your A's, and continue to work towards your SAT and ACT scores and all of those things while you're doing those things also. So we don't want to, of course, de-emphasize the scholar athlete piece of this, but today's discussion was kind of on leadership, motivation, embodying the values and doing all of those things that are kind of part of the more kind of amorphous L of this scholar athlete leader that we kind of get at. So I had fun here today. I don't know about you.
Me too, sir. It was great.
All right. So good. So we'll try to do these a little more here on different subjects. I think, we talk about this so much when we get together that, we're just going to take random topics or topics that we're always talking about and be able to, chat about them for, half an hour to 40 minutes or so.
Or
45 minutes.
topics that you email in to me at trish@gainserviceacademyadmission.com.
Yeah. Yeah. You can email me too. If you can find me on the website, you can find me. You can message me on Facebook or wherever we're located. So you can figure that out. Or if Trish can't answer it, she'll forward it to me.
That's right.
Okay. All right, Chris. It was great talking with you today, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good, sir. Thanks a lot.
Bye.